My sister raised me after my parents lost it over me being gay. I, 26F, have been sitting in my apartment for the last 3 days staring at my phone, wondering if I'm actually the cold-hearted daughter my mother says I am. We had our engagement dinner last Sunday, and what was supposed to be the happiest night of my life has turned into a massive family rift. To give you some background, I'm the youngest of three. My oldest sister is 32, I'll call her M, and my middle sister is 28, I'll call her S. Growing up, our household was intense. My parents are very conservative. My mom is deeply religious, while my dad is an atheist, but they both shared this very rigid, traditional view of how children should behave and what a proper family looks like. We moved from Asia to the States when I was 14, which was a massive culture shock for all of us. For me, moving to the States was the first time I realized that being different was even an option. I started seeing girls holding hands, I saw pride flags, and for the first time the knots in my stomach started to make sense. Being 14 and naive, I thought my parents would eventually understand because they loved me. I was wrong. I came out abruptly during dinner one night. I don't even remember what we were eating. I just remember the silence that followed. Then, the explosion. My dad didn't just yell. He lost his mind. He grabbed a plastic bucket from the utility area and threw it at me. It didn't hurt physically, but the sound of it hitting the wall behind my head is something I can still hear if I close my eyes. My mom was screaming. Not just yelling, but that high-pitched, guttural sound of someone who thinks their world is ending. She kept saying I was corrupted and broken. M, who was 20 at the time and finishing her second year of college, didn't hesitate. She walked into my room, grabbed a duffel bag, packed my clothes, and told me we were leaving. My parents didn't even try to stop us. They let their 14-year-old daughter walk out the door into the night because of who I liked. I lived with M in her tiny, cramped studio apartment for a year. She worked 2 jobs while going to school full-time, just to keep us fed. She was the one who went to my parent-teacher conferences. She was the one who bought me pads when I started my period because I was too scared to go home. She was the one who held me while I sobbed because I felt like a freak. My parents didn't call. They didn't check if I was alive. After a year, they calmed down. By that, I mean they decided that ignoring the problem was better than the scandal of having a runaway daughter. I moved back in for high school, but the atmosphere was ice cold. My parents barely spoke to me. If I tried to talk about my day, they'd give one-word answers. It was like living with 2 very judgmental ghosts. This is where S stepped in. She was 16 then, still living at home, and she became my shadow. She knew our parents were freezing me out, so she made it her mission to be loud enough for both of them. She'd sit in my room and do homework with me. She'd intercept my mom's passive-aggressive comments about sinful lifestyles by changing the subject or physically pulling me out of the room. When I wanted to go to my first prom, my parents refused to pay for a dress or even acknowledge the event. S saved up her waitressing money and took me shopping. When I turned 18, I moved out immediately. I wasn't going to spend another second in a house where I had to hide my soul. With M and S's guidance, I applied for scholarships and got into a great university. My parents did pay for my tuition, I won't lie about that. They handled the financial side of my education, which I know is a privilege. But they did it with a business transaction energy. There were no proud of you cards. No good luck on your finals texts. Just a monthly wire transfer and a reminder that I owed them for being so generous despite my choices. Fast forward to now. I'm 26, I have a career I love, and I'm engaged to a woman who is, without exaggeration, the kindest, most brilliant person I've ever met. We decided to host a small, intimate engagement dinner at our place. It was just her parents and brother and my parents and sisters. The night started off okay, though the tension was thick. My parents were polite in that way where you can tell they're biting their tongues. My fiancé's family is the complete opposite. They're warm, loud, and they've embraced me like their own daughter since day one. During the main course, my fiancé's mom stood up and said how happy she was for us. She insisted we both give a little speech. My fiancé went first. She's very close with her family, so she gave this beautiful, teary-eyed tribute to her parents for showing her what a healthy marriage looks like and to her brother for being her best friend. Everyone was clapping and dabbing their eyes. Then it was my turn. I stood up, and I looked at the table. I saw my parents sitting there, looking expectant. Then I looked at M and S. I saw M, who had sacrificed her early 20s to make sure I had a roof over my head. I saw S, who had been my shield in a house that felt like a war zone. I said, I want to thank my sisters. M, you were more of a parent to me at 20 than most people are at 50. You chose me when everyone else walked away. S, you stayed by my side when things were the darkest and made sure I never felt alone. Everything I am, my confidence, my career, the fact that I'm even standing here today, is because the two of you raised me. I love you both so much. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't even look at them. I just sat down. The silence at our end of the table was deafening. My fiancé's family, not knowing the full extent of the drama, clapped and cheered. My sisters were tearing up and reached across the table to squeeze my hands. But my parents? They looked like they'd been slapped. They stayed for another 20 minutes, barely eating, and then made a very stiff excuse about my dad having a headache and left. An hour later, my phone started blowing up. It was a long, rambling text from my mom. She told me I was deeply ungrateful and cruel. She brought up the bucket incident but reframed it, saying my dad was hurting and confused, and that I should have forgiven him years ago. She sent a literal bulleted list of everything they've paid for: my braces, my flights to the States, my university tuition, the car I drove in college. She said I humiliated them in front of my future in-laws by making it seem like they were monsters who didn't raise me. She ended it by saying, "We supported you financially when we didn't have to, considering the shame you brought to this family. To not even receive a thank you in public is a slap in the face to your father and me." I've been spiraling ever since. Part of me feels like she's right. They did pay for my school. They did let me move back in when I was 15. In their minds, providing food and shelter is the definition of parenting. But in my mind, parenting is being there when your kid is scared. It's not throwing things at them. It's not ignoring them for years while they live under your roof. My sisters are telling me to ignore her. Em told me, tuition doesn't buy a seat at the thank you table if you didn't provide the love. S said that if they wanted a shout out, they should have acted like parents when I actually needed them. Shake the guilt. I saw the look on my dad's face, and it wasn't anger. It was genuine hurt. My fiancée says she supports me no matter what, but she also noted that the vibe of the dinner shifted instantly and it was uncomfortable for her parents to witness. I feel like I took a moment that was supposed to be about love and turned it into a weapon to punish my parents for things they did 10 years ago. But at the same time, it felt like the most honest thing I've ever said. Am I the a-hole for only thanking my sisters and leaving my parents out? Update. First of all, the biggest update. I'm married now. The wedding was last weekend. We kept it small, about 56 people total, and held it in my wife's grandparents' backyard. They have this huge old tree in the middle of the yard that everyone insisted would be perfect for the ceremony, so that's where we set everything up. My wife's family handled most of the decorating, and it turned into this really cozy gathering instead of the big formal event people usually expect. There were long tables, string lights, flowers everywhere, and the weather cooperated in a way that felt almost suspiciously perfect. Despite everything that had been going on with my family, the day itself was actually peaceful. One thing that threw off the plans a little was that my oldest sister, Em, couldn't come. She was supposed to be my maid of honor, but 2 days before the wedding she went into early labor. It wasn't anything dangerous, thankfully, just earlier than expected. My nephew arrived healthy, loud, and apparently already very demanding according to the photos Em keeps sending us. I was disappointed she couldn't be there, but no one was upset about the reason. A new baby definitely outranks a wedding. My second sister, S, stepped in and handled everything Em was supposed to do. She gave the speech during the reception and managed to do it without crying, which honestly impressed me because she's always been the emotional one out of the three of us. She talked about how the three of us grew up sharing everything, including responsibility for each other, and how proud she was that I found someone who made me feel safe enough to build a life with. It was one of those speeches that made half the guests emotional even if they didn't know our whole history. The part that probably surprised me the most, though, involved my parents. I genuinely don't know how to describe what's been happening with my dad lately. It's like someone flipped a switch in his personality after the engagement dinner situation. For most of my life, he was distant, blunt, and uncomfortable with anything emotional. Even when things improved slightly after I became an adult, he still kept a kind of reserved distance. Since that dinner, he has turned into the most unexpectedly gentle person. Every morning I wake up to a message from him. Usually it's just something simple like "good morning" with a handful of flower emojis attached to it. The first time it happened, I thought he sent it by accident. Now it's become a daily thing. Sometimes he calls in the evening just to ask how my day went or to tell me about something random he read in the news. That kind of casual involvement never existed before. At first I assumed it was guilt after the argument about the engagement speech. Then it kept happening. Weeks passed, and he stayed consistent. He asked about the wedding planning, offered help a few times, and actually sounded excited about it. At the reception, he cried. Not just tearing up quietly, either. Full emotional crying while watching us dance. Seeing that honestly confused me more than anything else. My dad spent years acting like emotions were something embarrassing, and suddenly he's wiping his face during the father-daughter dance like it's the most normal thing in the world. If someone had told me a year ago that this would happen, I would have assumed they were joking. While that was happening, my mom went in the complete opposite direction. The months leading up to the wedding became increasingly tense because she seemed determined to turn every small moment into an argument. Nothing explosive, just constant little remarks that carried a clear message underneath them. Comments about how sometimes people change their minds later in life. Suggestions that I should talk to someone professional before committing to marriage. Occasional remarks about how weddings are supposed to be between a man and a woman, usually disguised as jokes that weren't really jokes. None of it was direct enough to start a full confrontation, but it was constant enough that it became exhausting. Conversations with her started feeling like walking through a field where you never knew when you'd step on something unpleasant. The strangest part was how normal she used to be about communication when we were younger. She was the parent who called to check on us, who remembered birthdays and school events. That version of her has slowly disappeared over the last few years. As the wedding got closer, the tension grew worse. At some point it became obvious she wasn't planning to come. She never announced it dramatically or created a big scene. She simply avoided confirming anything whenever we asked. Then a few days before the ceremony, she stopped responding to messages about travel arrangements entirely. When the day arrived, she just didn't show up. There wasn't a crisis or emergency. No sudden illness. No explanation beyond silence. Oddly enough, that didn't upset me as much as something else she did. Around the same time, Em gave birth to my nephew. It's the first baby in our family, something everyone had talked about for months. My sisters and I assumed our mom would be thrilled. She didn't visit the hospital. Not once. That part hurt more than her skipping the wedding. Whatever conflict she has with me shouldn't extend to a newborn baby who has nothing to do with any of it. Em tried to brush it off, saying the baby has plenty of people around already, but I could tell she was disappointed. Watching that happen made me start wondering if something deeper might be going on with my mom's mental health. Her behavior has shifted so drastically that it feels like we're dealing with a completely different person. I brought it up carefully with my dad at one point. Instead of arguing or defending her, he just sounded tired. He admitted that things at home have been difficult for a while and that she's been isolating herself more than usual. After that conversation, I sent him a few resources for counseling and mental health support in their area, just in case she might be willing to talk to someone eventually. There isn't much else I can realistically do from a distance, and pushing harder would probably make the situation worse. For now, I'm focusing on maintaining whatever relationship I can with my dad and my sisters. Another small thing that happened came from a suggestion someone left in the comments on my original post. A few people mentioned that acknowledging my parents' financial support during the wedding speech might ease some of the tension without taking away from the gratitude I feel toward my sisters. I decided to try it. During the reception speeches, I added a quick lighthearted line thanking my parents for contributing to my education and joking that the investment clearly paid off because I managed to marry someone amazing. It wasn't a dramatic moment, just a small comment that got a laugh from the guests and moved the speech along. My dad seemed happy about it. He came up afterward and hugged me longer than he ever has before. There wasn't a big emotional conversation attached to it, just a quiet moment where he looked relieved. Right now, life feels like it's moving into a new phase. My wife and I are preparing to move out of the country soon. The opportunity came up through her work, and it's something we both decided to pursue as a fresh start. We've spent the last few days organizing paperwork, packing boxes, and saying goodbye to friends before the move. In the middle of all that chaos, the wedding itself feels almost surreal. 1 week ago, we were standing in a backyard surrounded by people who care about us, promising to build a life together. Now we're planning an international move and adjusting to the reality that we're actually married. The family situation isn't completely resolved. My mom still hasn't reached out directly since the wedding, and I'm not expecting a sudden change there. If she eventually decides to reconnect, I'll deal with that conversation when it happens. For now, I'm focusing on the people who consistently show up. My sisters are already arguing over who gets to host the first holiday gathering once we're settled in the new country. Em keeps sending photos of my nephew every few hours like she's running a live news feed. My dad continues his daily flower emoji messages without missing a morning. Life isn't perfect, but it feels stable in a way it never did when I was younger. The engagement dinner drama that felt overwhelming a few months ago has slowly turned into just one moment in a much bigger story. I'm still grateful to my sisters for everything they did when we were growing up, and that hasn't changed. At the same time, my relationship with my dad seems to be evolving into something more open than it used to be. As for my mom, the situation is complicated and probably will stay that way for a while. Sometimes people grow closer over time. Sometimes they drift further away. Right now, I'm accepting that both things can happen in the same family at the same time. Either way, I'm married now, starting a new chapter of my life with someone who makes all of this chaos easier to handle. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.